All righty. Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's so good to share space with so many fabulous Bruins today. In case I have not met you, I see so many familiar faces. My name is Julie Sina, and I have as what is truly an honor to serve as your alumni director. And really so excited and grateful for you taking time from your day to spend time with each other this afternoon and really share your Bruin stories. And I hope you've been enjoying following the launch of our brand initiative, where we're trying to share so many Bruin stories. One of the things that we were thinking a lot about is when our organization gets big, we want to make sure that you and all of our alums can see yourself in the UCLA Alumni Association. So today, I know you're going to hear from some really fabulous Bruins sharing their leadership journey. And please don't hesitate to reach out and let us know other Bruins that you'd like us to reach out to and feature in this campaign that we're launching. So again, appreciate your leadership, appreciate how you show up for your alumni association, for your Bruins, for our community. And with that, I will toss it back to you, Karen. And Karen, thank you for your leadership in pulling these sessions together.
Thank you, Julie. Good evening, everyone. I am Karen McLean. I'm a senior director here in Alumni, and I'd like to welcome you to Leaders to Leaders. This is part of an ongoing leadership development program that aims to educate and empower volunteer leaders who are the engine of UCLA alumni. We hope that you can develop deeper connections with other network leaders, reflect on your volunteer experience, build confidence in your leadership, and explore ways to foster an inclusive community within your respective networks. For right now, can you all take a moment to introduce yourselves in the chat with your name, the network that you are from, and when your Bruin story began, so we can get an idea of who's on the call tonight. I also invite our staff to introduce yourselves as well in the chat. So, before we begin, I would like to acknowledge UCLA Alumni Association's presence at UCLA is on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Gabrielino Tongva peoples. During today's session, we'll hear from an alumni panel discussing the power of storytelling and leadership development. If you have questions during the presentation, feel free to put your questions in the chat, and we'll allow time at the end to address those questions. So if they're in the chat, that's helpful so that we can capture them. So today's panel will be moderated by Devon Dickau, who serves as a director on the UCLA Alumni Association board. So let's go ahead and get started. Devon, take it away.
Thanks, Julie. Thanks, Karen. And huge shout out to the Alumni Association team for planning today's session. Hello, Bruins. Good to see some new faces and familiar faces. And thanks for joining for those who are here live and for those who are watching the recording later. As Karen said, I'm Devon Dickau. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a white cisgender man with brown hair. Today I'm wearing a blue short sleeve shirt. And on the personal side, I live with my husband and our twin toddlers and pup in the Calabasas area. On the professional side, I'm a business consultant for Fortune 500 companies in spaces related to sustainability, social impact, and inclusion. But the main reason I'm here today as your moderator is that I'm a director on the board of the Alumni Association, as Karen said, including as chair of the Diversity Advisory Committee and co-chair of our Strategic Partnerships Committee. I'm also a former network leader, serving as co-president of the Lambda Alumni Association for several years for LGBTQ+ Bruins. And I'm a double Bruin. My Bruin story began in 2007, but I'm both an Anderson MBA class of 15 graduate and undergraduate class of 07, where my major was American Literature and Culture. And I had an unofficial double major of film, I like to say. I took 13 film classes during my time at UCLA. And because of that joint study, I like to say that at UCLA, I studied storytelling. And between that and my 3 years on staff at the Daily Bruin, I spent a lot of my time thinking about the power of stories and how stories can drive change, and create a better world. Our goals for today's conversation are really threefold. First of all, to encourage and inspire all of you as alumni leaders to use stories, including your own stories, to further engage with other alums and to build stronger relationships. Secondly, to give you frames of thinking and practical tools for using storytelling to scale the impact of your networks and the UCLA alumni community at large. And third, we hope to use today to issue you a call to action. As Julie mentioned, and as you've hopefully seen from the Alumni Association's recent communications on social media, also a feature on the UCLA homepage, emails, perhaps in other ways, an anchor of our new Alumni Association strategy is the Story of campaign that features the incredible stories of everyday Bruins from all experiences, identities, walks of life as a way to invite all Bruins back into the alumni family and also meet you and other alums where they are personally and professionally. So with that in mind, I'd like to posit a definition of storytelling to ground us for today, inspired by one of our panelists, Cheryl. Thanks again, Cheryl. And so I'll just start by sharing as a thought starter before I pass it to our panelists. Storytelling is the act of sharing something personal about yourself or others that inspires the audience to think and or feel. I'll say it again. Storytelling is the act of sharing something personal about yourself or others that inspires the audience to think and or to feel. So without further ado, you've heard a little bit about me, but I'd like to pass it to our panelists for quick 60-second hellos. Just so that our audience can get to know you better, panelists, please share with us a snippet of your personal story. What would you like us to know about the story of you? And we will start with you, Cheryl.
Thank you so much, Devon. Hi, everyone. I'm Cheryl Farrell, and I have a corporate communications consultancy, Cheryl Farrell Communications, LLC. One of my signature coaching tools is called Pop-Up Storytelling for Organizations. It's a program that allows employees and members of groups to better collaborate by way of sharing their story. Now, my professional story is rather eclectic. I have been in commercial banking sales, I've been in HR communications, and I actually spent 7 years as on-air talent for the Jeopardy show. So you can imagine when I go to networking and they say, what do you do? I don't have a business card big enough to cover all those things. But I found that communications was the through line. No matter what industry, what job, what role I played, effective communications was vital. And that's what led me to storytelling. And I delight in this work, and I'm excited to be here to share it with you today.
Thanks so much, Cheryl. What about you, Marina? What's a snippet of the story of you?
So I like to start from the beginning, and I like to say I grew up in a very small town near the Port of Los Angeles, and I loved the beach. So from Cherry Beach to Bolsa Chica Beach to Cabrillo to Hermosa to Manhattan to Redondo, I was all about the beach because it was free and I love being in the sun. After I graduated from UCLA with a BA in sociology, I moved to San Jose, California, because I wanted to get into the tech industry. So I moved in 94, the same year that Amazon, Yahoo, and who's the other one that I put on there? Oh, Netscape were founded. And today, fast forward to today, I really love using my marketing and my communication skills to connect other Bruins, to create a greater sense of belonging across our community. And I also love a good CrossFit workout with my daughter, my 23-year-old daughter, who's also a Bruin, Emily.
Woohoo, multi-generational Bruin families. Love it. Thanks, Marina. Ron, what about you? What's a snippet of your story?
Hi, I'm the middle child of Chinese immigrant parents. I was raised in rural Arkansas and moved to California in my freshman year in high school. I attended 4 high schools, and no, I wasn't the troublemaker. I began my UCLA story in 1979. I worked very hard, 66 hours a week in 100-degree plus weather during my summer jobs as an agricultural inspector for the state of California. And then I also worked part-time while I was attending UCLA. I somehow managed to pay for my valuable degree in math applied science. I met my wife Peggy at Reber Hall, and we're parents of 3 Bruins, Matt, Zach, and Rebecca. I worked
Wow.
38 years in software development in the life insurance industry. And then in my spare time, I'm very passionate about leadership development, whether it's coaching elementary, middle, high school students in sports or academic competitions, developing mine and other people's staffs at work, mentoring UCLA students, or helping corporate executives. When I retired from life insurance in 2022, I joined Wooden's Wisdom as a partner. Some people might think it's crazy. I do it with no pay, but I work on preserving and enhancing John Wooden's legacy and the use of the pyramid of success. I never considered myself a storyteller, but somehow Sandy Nguyen convinced me to come on here and be a storyteller, and it's given me an opportunity to learn from these other esteemed panelists. So thank you.
Well, Ron, I think the full group would agree. We just heard an incredibly compelling story just from you right now in a minute or so. So thank you so much for being here. And last but not least, I'll pass it over to you, Connie. What's a snippet of your story?
Hi, everyone, and thank you for hosting this, Devon. Really appreciate it. And Julie and Karen and everyone at the UCLA Alumni Association. You have busy lives, and we appreciate all the work that you do. My name is Connie Guglielmo, and I'm a longtime technology and business reporter based in Silicon Valley. I live down the street from the Apple garage, and I'm in my son's bedroom, which I'm packing up because he finally moved out in June and is doing his residency in Seattle. Looking forward to just putting my books on the shelf and not his, although I'm keeping his stormtrooper helmet. I graduated from UCLA convinced that I was going to go to law school, but my experience at the UCLA Daily Bruin convinced me instead that I should be a journalist, and that's what I've done my entire career. I grew up in New York, in Brooklyn, visited UCLA over one winter break to see my aunt and uncle who had moved to Huntington Beach from Long Island, and everybody was in shorts. And that's when I knew I was going to move to California, because it was November and it was like a Disney movie to me. And UCLA, the whole experience was like a Disney movie to me. I had a lot of fun. I am now the network leader for the Daily Bruin Alumni Network, DBAN. And so storytelling is what I do. It's what I talk about, what I encourage people to do after a career working for Bloomberg, Forbes, CNET, MacWeek, a lot of tech publications. I am now a free agent writing about AI and technology on my own since January, because I'm also working on a journalism project. Journalism is under fire, I think, as we all know, and it's time to move out of the trenches into the mainstream and take some bullets for everyone else. So I'm looking forward to the discussion today.
Thank you, Connie. And I think a natural follow-up to what you just shared and to get us into today's conversation about storytelling. You already alluded to this a little bit, but how has storytelling played a role in your journey as a leader within your network particularly, and just as a UCLA alum and how you interact with other UCLA alums?
Yeah, I mean, it's really great that Ron talked about his journey, because that's what stories are. They're the stories of people and their lives and how they navigate the world. So storytelling is a way to authentically connect with people. And we're living through some very inauthentic times. Technology, social media, AI is, filling our networks and our communication channels with a lot of really bad information, misinformation, disinformation, propaganda. AI generated false information is called AI slop. If you don't know that, that's the term for it. And so people are looking for connections to real information, but sometimes they don't know how to tell what is real information. So who are you going to trust? You're going to trust your family. You're going to trust your friends. You're going to trust your coworkers or people that are in your community, because you're going to look to them to provide some context and insight. I always believe in fact checking everything that you read. I'm a journalist. And so it's not because I don't trust people. It's because that's my nature, is to constantly look up things myself. But we have the means to do that so easily, to find out what's happening in the world around us, what's real and what's not, if we just take the time to do it. But it starts by connecting with people. finding a way to talk to them about what connects to them. And I'm sure I mentioned that I grew up in Brooklyn. If there's anyone else from the East Coast who moved to California, went to UCLA, and wants to talk about what that was like, I remember being one of the only dark-haired people in my sorority. And people were like, where are you from? Because I was surrounded by Malibu blondes, which were fabulous, my best friends to this day. But there's always stories to tell that connect us. And with the loss of local newspapers and the demise of a lot of trusted media, that one-to-one connection with your community becomes even more important.
Thanks, Connie. Storytelling is a source of connection. I love that, and I think it's such a perfect theme for today's conversation. Marina, what about you? How has storytelling played a role in your journey as an alumni leader?
Yeah, so thank you, Devon. I think as a leader in the Bay Area Bruins board, I think I use stories in a couple of ways. I would say I really like to use stories to lift up other people's confidence. Sometimes they're not confident about something that they might be pursuing. Sometimes they're a little anxious or hesitant about something new that's going to happen, like a parent that I might meet at a new Bruin send-off, right? They're a little bit anxious about, oh, their child's moving away and what's it going to be like? And I love to share stories about, here are the exciting things that are going to happen on campus, or here's how much fun move-in day is going to be. And then that gets them excited, right? It creates a vision for what's going to happen, that there's fun ahead. So I love to share other people's stories in that regard to help kind of give them some confidence about what's coming forward. And then if they're going through maybe a challenging time, sometimes I'll be talking with a young alum who maybe hasn't found a job yet and they're feeling discouraged or dejected or feeling a little bit lost. Then I'll share stories about other young alums and what they're doing or what they've tried or how they're connecting with other people to help lift them up about actions that they can take. So it's kind of like I just use stories to help give people ideas about how their future state can look. And then that usually brightens their day.
I love it. Marina, you're sharing some examples of how storytelling can be used to navigate situations, solve problems, encounter challenges, create fun, and it's all back to that theme of connection. Cheryl, passing it over to you, kind of a different angle, but in the similar vein, would you share an example of a time when a story helped to bridge differences or build stronger connection in your community?
Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, storytelling is integral to the consultancy that I have and the hundreds of individuals that I've met through workshops and speaking engagements. There's this constant that comes up in all of them, and that is finding that we're more alike than unalike, that one piece of information can make a difference in how a problem is solved. Now, one of the rules of engagement in my consultancy is to preserve privacy. So when we're sharing our story, you want to make sure that when people are being vulnerable, you're not out, sharing their information. So I'm going to change the details of the story a little bit just to honor that commitment. There was a situation where I was invited into an academic HR staff. It was a subgroup of a larger HR group. And it was right before the pandemic was officially called a pandemic. It was in those early weeks or days, actually, we're wondering, should we shake hands? Should we be in the same room? What does all this mean? Masks had not even been introduced at that point, but I'd been booked far enough in advance. They honored the commitment. So I'm there seeing that there's this unrest among the HR people. And of course, that would go out into the larger staff. And there's a exercise in this presentation that unearths a line in their storyline. And one of the attendees, I'll call her Mary, says, my colleagues would be surprised to know that I am a foster mom and that I volunteer at a foster care agency. Her fellow staff member sitting next to her, call her Jane, said her jaw dropped. She was shocked. And out loud, she says, I've shared a cubicle with you for 5 years and I had no idea. Did you know that I'm adopted? And they started having this conversation in the middle of the session. I let those things go on because it's an example of how you can be in meetings and attend all kinds of group situations and not really know who you're with. The point here is not to get the number of someone and share how to grow roses or other things that they have in common, but it now means that I know you beyond just your name, rank, and serial number. I know you more than just the department you're in, the car you drive, the neighborhood you're in. And I think that's especially important for our networks, because there may be someone outside of our affinity group or network who has exposure or experience that can help us solve a problem or meet a goal.
Thank you, Cheryl. And what really resonates with me about the story you shared is the necessity for intentionality sometimes in bringing out those stories, and creating structure can feel unnecessary when we think, oh, stories should just be natural. Sharing about ourselves should just be natural. But when we create that structure for folks to share and encourage them and create the space, as you mentioned, then that's when often the stories come to life. I've had similar experiences where folks worked together for a decade and didn't know certain things about each other because they never asked the question. They never were given that opportunity to share. Connie, I know when we were prepping for this conversation and we were talking about this idea of bridging differences, a different example UCLA related came to mind for you. I'm curious if you could share that with the group as well.
Yeah, sure. It was a very interesting spring for the students at the UCLA Daily Bruin, because the UCLA campus became a center of nationwide attention because of the protests that were happening there. And the students on the paper were excited to be part of a national, international story, if you will, but they were also kind of freaked out about how to cover it. They knew there was a responsibility to cover it. They were concerned about their personal safety. They were concerned about their well-being, but they really just wanted to do things right. And so they reached out to the alumni, and we had so many alumni volunteer to host how to cover a protest, how to deal with a crisis situation, how to, do journalism under trying circumstances, how to protect yourself, how to, have good conversations, meaningful conversations with adversaries. I can't tell you how many journalists across the country who had attended UCLA, and some who did not, who participated in some of those training workshops for the students. The students were looking, of course, for advice and guidance, but they just were also looking to people who had a shared experience, who could understand what they were talking about at a time when they were under a lot of pressure and feeling a lot of emotions and stress. And so the storytelling that they were doing was obviously important. It got them a lot of awards and attention, and they're still getting awards. But it also allowed them to connect to alumni, allow alumni to share their experiences and provide like real world advice that they could use. And it also gave us an opportunity to learn more about what they were thinking, so much so that they were having a lot of, PTSD, if you will, from the experience. And Julie and the Alumni Association, when I contacted her to say, how do we help them? Look, we got them flak jackets from local media that donated like gear that they could wear to protect themselves, which is an odd thing to do in the center of Los Angeles, but having covered riots and protests, I understand. But that emotional follow-up and getting a counselor in right away showed the students that there was somebody listening to them, somebody ready to help them, and the community there to support them. And the feedback we got after that, just by being human beings, just by connecting with them and understanding what they were going through, was super important. So storytelling is how that journey began, but it opened up all of these other things.
Connie, just got a little bit of chills as you were sharing that, both because of the subject matter and just how you brought it to life, but also how special that relationship became between alumni and students. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I think as I pass to you, Ron, what sticks in my mind about what Connie just shared, and also with your introduction, Ron, is the messenger of a story we cannot separate from the humanity of of that messenger, and who whether we're telling our own story or someone else, we're human first and foremost. Ron, you said you had to be convinced in a way, told that you're a storyteller, but to me, it's clear that you're a natural storyteller. I'm curious, Ron, how can leaders, in your opinion, use storytelling to inspire action and drive transformative change within their networks and organizations?
So I worked at Pacific Life, and I was a pretty good manager, I think. I was very efficient. But one time, marketing VP who I didn't really know came by to chat with me, and he told me a story about how he was prompted to make a big leap in his career. He said another executive had asked him, "What do you want your legacy to show?" That brief interaction and question made me ponder my future. And that's the day that I transformed from a manager into a leader. So then you have many ways that you can lead. So I chose the pyramid of success as my guide to becoming a better leader and to help other people in the organization grow their careers. I shared the pyramid with my staff, and we worked together, and we noticed that we were all improving. And then other departments noticed, and soon we had interdepartmental meetings to discuss the pyramid and how to apply it throughout the division. And it all started with just a very brief chat with the VP and him telling me his very simple story and asking me a compelling question. So storytelling allows us to build relationships with others. We go from friendship to various stages of loyalty, and that leads to what John Wooden called cooperation. I know some people prefer to call it collaboration. And then the relationships that we build with each other give us a higher likelihood of being alert enough and observant enough through many sets of eyes and ears, and open-minded enough to identify improvement or transformational opportunities. And then we gather and share information with each other, make decisions, and combine our skills to drive change. Together, we can do what Bill Walton would say is be quick, but don't hurry before a window of opportunity closes. And then when we're truly a team, it's amazing how much can be accomplished if no one is concerned with who gets the credit. So that's when transformational change happens. In the pyramid of success, that's called competitive greatness. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron. So I'm hearing that storytelling is both a vehicle to posit a leadership framework such as John Wooden's pyramid, but also a part of it. It's part of leadership. Thank you. It's very clear how much you live it genuinely in so many ways. Marina, what about you? How, in your opinion, can leaders use storytelling to inspire action and drive change in their networks?
So I'd like to share a story maybe about how I try to respond to opportunities that present themselves. In our last Bay Area Bruins planning meeting, I was looking at the RSVP list and I noticed we had quite a few guests who had RSVP'd to attend our meeting. And I thought, oh my gosh, I need to change the what do you call the order of the agenda, because we had a certain way we normally do the agenda, but with so many guests, I thought I should start with all the ways that they could get involved, just in case they drop off, just in case they don't have time to stay on a long time, so I completely changed the agenda and I started at the beginning and I said, here are all the ways, here's the openings we have on our board, here's what those rules could look like. If you don't have time for a long time commitment, here's some one-offs, right? Here's what it would look like to do a one-off volunteer at a Bruin Bound event, or here's what it looked like to welcome new parents at a New Bruin send-off. Right. So it's just kind of painting the vision for how people could get involved. You often hear that people want to help, they just don't know how. So I really tried to make it easy for people to see how they could insert themselves and how they could see themselves even as leaders if maybe they didn't know that they could or know that that was an option for them. So that's one way that I've done it. And I think in your question, you do have the word transformative change. And I personally get a little bit intimidated by, oh my God, am I doing transformative change? Like that feels kind of overwhelming, kind of big. I don't know that I always choose change. Sometimes change happens to me. And you kind of figure out a way how to rise to meet it. So I kind of like to operate on the one-on-one. I'm a little more of an introvert. I'm a little more of an intimate person. And so I'll look for those opportunities to introduce two new students at a New Bruin send off so that they've got a buddy to have lunch with once they get to LA, right? So I'm all about looking for those moments of intimacy that I can create to help others move forward that in ways that transforms their life.
Thanks, Marina. I love that take on transformative change. I think transformation happens in small ways every day, one step at a time. And it really sheds light on the importance of every single individual voice being part of the conversation and everyone's individual role. And so on that note, back to you, Cheryl. How can storytelling be used to empower underrepresented voices, perhaps, and amplify their impact in leadership spaces?
You. It's an important question. I want to set it up first with this idea that Connie inspired a few minutes ago, and that storytelling tends to come up in a moment of crisis.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we can go along our way, and then if there's a wildfire or a flood or anything else, we have people talking to one another that they wouldn't have done otherwise. So I advocate storytelling just because it's a sunny Wednesday afternoon and the good that can come from it. As it relates to underrepresented voices, I think storytelling can help in two ways. One, to debunk this idea of code switching. It's where particularly people of color, African Americans, contort themselves in a way to fit in with the dominant culture, whether it's through changing their hairstyle or their voice or how they conduct themselves. And if that's too inauthentic, it does have, I think, mental health consequences. And so when you know your story and tell your story, you are putting out the most authentic person that you know to be. It also helps individuals discern if this is the culture they need to be in. If you, knowing your story, are having some issues with the way you are received, you can make some choices. I think for some groups, we're socialized to keep our head down. Don't bring attention to yourself. Just do hard work and you'll get promoted. You'll find new opportunities, and that may work in grade school, but it doesn't work in the real world. So I think storytelling, personal storytelling, and sharing those stories can help. Another consideration is that many times decisions for leadership, promotion, and the like are done in rooms where we are not present. So having our stories, an accurate story given to our ally or our sponsor, can speak on our behalf. And it's a primal nature to create a story around someone, and it's rarely accurate and it's rarely flattering. So this idea of take control of your story. And I think there's just, like I said, some mental health, some health benefits, but also career growth. And all of this can be applied in our recruitment efforts as network leaders.
Thank you, Cheryl. Reflecting on what Cheryl just shared, Ron, or the open question of how to empower, how can storytelling be used to empower underrepresented voices? What's your take?
So I'm also going to use John Wooden quotes. You'll see that. Okay. So one time, as a parents council member, I believe that they should use the quote, "Be true to yourself." And many of the parents council members who are on this Zoom meeting will remember this situation. The Bruin Guardian Scholars, they come through the foster care system, and each year UCLA hosts a giving thanks celebration dinner for the Bruin Guardian Scholars. And I'll never forget the first one I ever attended. So there was an American born and raised senior who started talking about why he had gratitude. And he said it was the first time he'd ever eaten turkey and dressing, something that we all take for granted. And it never dawned on me that a graduating senior at UCLA would experience it for the first time especially if they were born in the United States. And that made me forever, want to support Bruin Guardian scholars. So, and then the next example that I have, you can't live a perfect day without doing something for someone who will never be able to repay you. So I used to be a photographer for a lot of UCLA events, and the alumni Lambda advisor noticed that I was at these events, and he approached me, and he said he noticed that I treated people with respect, and he asked me if I would photograph a Lambda graduation celebration and be sensitive to the students. Um, and I let him know that I had been mentored to high school groups in our city, and that some of the students had never let their parents know that they were gay, and they were afraid of their parents' reaction. So I understood what he was asking me to do at this Lambda graduation celebration. And so the first few students that I took photographs of, they were kind of apprehensive. And I told them that that I'd been asked to help capture moments from their celebration, and that I would not personally use any of the photographs, that I would give them to UCLA to share with them. And they placed a lot of trust in me. So that made me feel good, and I've continued to support a lot of the functions that they have. And then the third example, I think it was already Cheryl kind of mentioned it. There's no substitute for hard work. So when in my introduction, I had said I had worked hard for my degree, but my hard work pales in comparison to the challenges that UCLA's undocumented students face. So you hear many inspiring real life stories. Some of them are homeless, living out of their automobiles. Sometimes they have to choose between eating and being able to buy gas to make it to campus. And so on Parents Council, we supported the food pantry, and then other members and I have helped with the undocumented students graduation celebration. So my advice to the underrepresented voices is to stay authentic. The stories are real and can stand on their own, but also be willing to ask for help. There's strength in numbers, and the Bruin Alumni Association members are here to help. And we need to, as alumni leaders, be alert to the challenges that these underrepresented voices face and be eager to help them. Otherwise, they'll stop asking us.
Thank you, Ron. And Cheryl for sharing these examples of the importance of seeking and sharing stories from so many different voices, diversity of perspectives, experiences, identities. And this is one of the many ways that the world around us continues to change, thinking about who is underrepresented, whose voice are we missing, whose story needs to be told, is, I think, a part of how all of you see storytelling as a tool for leadership. And so for everyone in the audience, I'm going to ask the panel one more question. We'll do quick answers across all four of them, and then we're going to open it up to you if you have questions for. So start thinking about what those questions might be. Feel free to put them in the chat, or we can have you come off mute and say them out loud. Either way is fine. But in the spirit of thinking about what's next and the future, panel, this is for all of you. How do you see storytelling evolving as a tool for connection and leadership in the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years? The pace of change is such that maybe we should only look a year out these days, but let's say 5 to 10 years, and I'll start with you, Marina.
Oh, wow. Starting with me. Okay. Now, okay. So as I thought about this question, it is really hard to think about the future without also considering our technology, right? Because it keeps evolving fairly quickly. And not always serving us, right? Not always unifying us. There's a lot of our platforms that are dividing us. The algorithms are not so great for bringing people together. So I think if we think about the future of storytelling, I'm not sure if the act of storytelling is going to change that much as we are going to be increasingly called to come together and being intentional about being face to face, about creating those moments of shared experiences. For this recent season of Dinner with 12 Strangers, I went out of my way to attend 2 Dinner with 12 Strangers in my area because I want to be intentional about making new friendships, about being face to face, laughing with other Bruins, right? Like laughing together. And we need those moments to bring us together when we're not together, and they'll then we can connect digitally, totally fine, but we've had that moment, right? We've seen each other's faces and we've smiled and we've laughed and we've shared experiences. So that's what I think about when I think about the future. I think we need to be way more intentional about leaning in, listening to each other. I was cheating by looking at some of Ron's notes. One of Ron's notes is, really listening to other people's stories. And I like to think of myself as, yes, sometimes I might share my story, but really I want to think of myself as a collector of stories. Whose story am I listening to? Because maybe I can help them. Maybe I can be of service to them if I know their story. Also, maybe I can introduce them to someone else who can help them. Maybe I can't help them, but maybe I can connect them to a resource, connect them to another person, and then that helps make their journey that much more positive. So just leaning in on that, listening, and then face to face.
Thank you, Marina. What about you, Cheryl?
I concur with Marina that I believe storytelling is immutable. I think it's been around since the beginning of time. You may have shared a story by quill, and now we're doing it with Zoom across the world. And that just expands the opportunity. So I'm optimistic despite all the things that are associated with the technology and the adverse things that are going on. But I think it'll be exciting to connect with more, and we're not restricted by geography.
Amazing. Thank you, Cheryl. What about you, Connie? The future of storytelling.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier, AI slop is going to overwhelm us. It's already happening. And so technology is a means to an end. It's not an end. So remember that. People use technology to accomplish things. And if you look to technology to be an answer, yes, it allows us to be connected. And I'm thrilled I can Skype with my kids or FaceTime with them when they're traveling around the world. But technology is pulling us apart because the bad actors out there have figured out how to use it to manipulate. And I mentioned that there's a lack of local news coverage and local newspapers. And I do think what's happening in this country, especially, is going to force people to look closer to home for more information because they're going to be more distrustful or fearful of what they're reading and not knowing how to vet it. So that storytelling at the local level is going to become more important. There's been a movement away from that for the past 2 decades, and I'm optimistic that that kind of storytelling will come back. And I'll just want to say one other thing. I'm a big believer in facts. Facts are facts, and they are non-judgmental. And if you try to have a good conversation with someone, even if you disagree with them, and you can keep it to a facts-based discussion, you can actually find connection and build bridges. It's when you come from a hostile place, or you're setting up a conversation to be about somebody's going to win and someone's going to lose, that you're always going to lose. So facts can be your friend, and thinking about what affects people on the ground at the local level. I can't tell you how many stories I've read in the past few weeks, and I've been talking to consulting with editorial groups about the price of eggs and how that is affecting people and what it is. And this group I worked with created an eggometer to track the price of eggs across the country. People care about that stuff, and it's a way to connect people, right? Maybe you're not worthy of deviled eggs at the next potluck because they're too expensive, but in the future, I will bring deviled eggs. So anyway, it's a silly story, but I thought I'd share it.
thing you kind of what resonates to me particularly about the point on local or close to home in relation to today's conversation is that one circle or concentric circle of home could be the UCLA alumni community in this case. And as we think about your individual networks, whether they're geographically based or not, or just the UCLA community generally, the 600,000 plus alums around the world, that can be a trusted source for these stories and for hopefully for facts as well. Ron, what about you? How do you see storytelling evolving as a tool for connection and leadership?
So a lot of what I had written for myself has already been said. So the challenge is to make sure that we can translate our authenticity to the new types of technology that's being used. People with knowledge, not necessarily a degree in the social sciences and communications, should thrive. And I think that as leaders, the very least that we should do is to surround ourselves with people who can help us with this type of knowledge in social sciences and communications and learn from them. That's what I'm going to do.
Love it. Well, ending on that note of learning from each other is a perfect segue into our Q&A. So I don't see any questions in the chat yet. Team alumni, if there have been any questions, feel free to ping them to me. And then, yeah, again, feel free to raise your hand, come off mute, or put them in the chat. I do see one question coming through. So the question panel, and I'll pass this to whoever is interested in asking first. The question is, I am someone who rambles on and on. If you were to describe the anatomy of structure of an effective story, what would that include?
I would love to jump in on that.
I figured, Cheryl, this would be a good one for you.
Well, I'm sure Connie will agree with me as well. There's a structure to a story. There's a story arc. There's a setup that tells us the background, the context. Then there's some conflict or tension. Something happened. And then there's a resolution. And resolution isn't necessarily happily ever after. It just means that the tension before it is abated. And we may run through that cycle over and over and over again. But the nice thing is when you see that cycle, you know that this current crisis will resolve. And I don't know if that's just old age talking, but I've just seen whatever that conflict or tension is, it resolves. So whether we're talking about a work experience and you want to talk, this is where I was, this is what I did, this was what the problem was, and this is how I solved it. And the last point here is no matter what you're conveying, it does need to inspire one to think and feel. It's not just a litany of events, this happened and that happened. You want to find those comments that are relatable to the listener, because when they feel that it's their story, they're more likely to engage, they're more likely to remember it.
I want to offer some tactical advice
Please.
to a meanderer. I think, is that what you said they were, a meanderer?
Yep, Rambler, yep.
Yeah. So I worked at Bloomberg for 7 years, and it's a wire service. We have to type stories really fast. I can write a story in like 5 minutes because that's how you're trained. In order to understand what you're trying to say, the first thing that you have to do is write the headline of your story. Of course, after you've done the research and interviewed people, like what is it that you're trying to say? And if you go to Google or your favorite social media network, every headline in the world is between 63 and 80 characters. That includes spaces. So as reporters, we would have to write 20 versions of the headline between 63, well, on a Bloomberg terminal, it's 63 characters because that's the limitation. But the rest of the world, 63 to 80 characters. So you have to condense your story to 63 to 80 characters because that is the nut, the crux of what you're trying to get across. And you can riff off that in various ways, but then those are different stories that require a different, the meat of any story is called the nut graph, N-U-T graph. You can look it up, Google, what is the nut graph? It's the so what, it's the context, what it means. It's usually 2 or 3 sentences, but condensing your story down to a headline focuses your thinking because it's really, what are you trying to say? You can say 50,000 things, but you want to pick one thing and you want to pick compelling examples. That's your nut graph to go with it. So that's how you can start and avoid the, I mean, I'm not going to stop you from being a meanderer. I think there's a certain charm to meandering myself, but if you want to feel like you're being concise, do that.
Love it. Thank you, Connie. Thank you, Cheryl. I'm looking at the chat. We have some questions coming through. Amazing. Let's go to Sharon's question next. How does storytelling mix match with oral history to explain things? I spent 3 years living with Native Americans who taught the tribe to learn. How does one differentiate to explain to others? Panelists, would any of you like to take this one?
I don't want to monopolize, but I always have something to say.
Sure, go for it, Cheryl.
I think it's the West African communities that have the griot. They're the storytellers in their culture, and it was a sacred royal role. And I think I've read that neuroscience says our brain is wired to receive stories in a certain way. You can get a list, and then you can tell it in a story, and you will remember more with the story. You're more likely to assume that it is your story, and you take ownership of it. So the idea of different cultures using that as their means of communication, I don't think is an accident. It's the way that they can keep traditions alive and keep underlying principles alive. So I may have meandered from the question, but it's the idea that oral histories are fabulous sources for understanding the power of stories.
Thank you, Cheryl. I'm going to move to the next question from Julie, and I'm going to pass it to you, Marina. So think about it as I read it out loud. Julie says, I'm struck by the importance of the art of listening. Any guidance for how we can focus on that or build our skills in that area?
I think probably the first thing I usually try to do is probing questions, right? Open-ended probing questions. Tell me more about that, right? That's kind of like an easy phrase to remember. If someone says they're frustrated or someone says, oh gosh, such and such happened, tell me more about that. How did that make you feel? What were you expecting instead? So it's really, maybe it's acting a little bit like a therapist, just letting somebody really get a riff going, so that just open the floor and help them release whatever it is that they're feeling. That's what I've found has helped and worked. And then that usually ends up going in some direction that they want to dig deeper on.
Thanks, Marina. I think Julie's question really highlights the reciprocity. We're not just telling stories, we're listening, and listening is part of the telling, and telling is part of the listening. Any others want to chime in on that one before I move to the next question?
No,
Nancy,
I'm good.
did you raise your hand?
Well, I had a different question, but go ahead. Can I ask a question?
Sure. Yes, please.
So we're all, most of us, leaders in some type of group at UCLA. And what Marina was saying is listening and being in person is really important. What do we do when we have less and less members attending and we're having trouble getting them to join? Is there something that we can put out there that would, I don't know if you put storytelling in the theme of what we're trying to do to get together. I don't know. I feel like some of our networks are not getting together as often. And I think that's really important for the listening and the storytelling. And I don't know.
Thanks for the question, Nancy. I think in our last 4 minutes, you're really getting to the crux of why we had this session today, which is that as we think about our networks and just our strategy for the Alumni Association and alumni engagement overall, we want to continue to contemplate how storytelling can be a tool for solving all of our biggest challenges. And we believe that it can be. That's why there's the focus on storytelling with this new approach. So in our final minute or two, team, panelists, any initial thoughts on Nancy's question?
Can I ask a clarifying question, Nancy? Are you saying that you don't have people signing up to host events, so you don't even have the events on the calendar, or you do have the events on the calendar, but people aren't showing up?
Both. I'm talking about meetings, happy hours, all that. The attendance has gone down, and we want to boost it back up.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think along these lines, it would really help, because then people want to get together more if they hear all the stories. And I mean, even one thing that I can even think of is, we're in Bruin professionals and we give scholarships. Come meet our scholars. We haven't done that yet.
Mhm.
I mean, and they have compelling stories, and this is the type of thing that I'm thinking about. But it's a little bit of both.
So
Mhm.
I can tell you what's working for Bay Area Bruins, and because I do feel like we're having a little bit of momentum right now, but it's a dispersed thing that several of our board, I won't say all, but several of our board members are doing well. It's the one-on-one conversations. You have to actually, when I see the guests that come to a meeting, I follow up afterwards one-on-one. And when I follow up, and then Jen follows up with some, and then Magali follows up with some, then you get more engagement. And then we handhold them through the process of, here's how you host a game watch party. Hey, men's basketball is doing amazing. How about a game watch party in your area? We don't have anybody up in Nevada doing that. Would you be willing to do that? So it's the one-on-one hand-holding, the outreach, helping them feel secure and confident in doing it. And then like celebrating them. We were on a meeting and Magali said, let's everybody remember, this is not my event. This is so-and-so's event. She's brand new. Jean's going to do it. It's Jean's event. And then we go Jean, right? And we celebrate her and we thank her and we appreciate her for stepping out of her comfort zone and hosting something. So we're getting that momentum, and we are getting then how you get the participation, how you get people showing up. I still say it's still kind of like small potatoes, right? It's still like 10 to 20 people at an event. But that's okay. I think that's okay. People are showing up, we're making friends, we're making connections. I'm good with those numbers. But that, sadly, it's social media. We see more success if I make the time, and we don't have a social media manager on our board. That is the role that is hard to fill, that no one wants to sign up for, because feeding the beast of social media just feels like high volume, right? So if I can onesie twosie it, and I do something on our Facebook group, and I do something, I actually see more success if I just do it on my own personal LinkedIn, outside of the Bay Area Bruin LinkedIn group. Because the Bay Area LinkedIn group is only going to reach, I don't know, I'm going to make up a number, 350 people. And so then the impressions that I get on that and the engagement I get on that is low. But if I do something on my personal LinkedIn, oh my gosh, I've got like, I don't know, 5,000 connections on my personal LinkedIn, and everybody sees it, right?
Yeah.
So
The
that
messenger of the story.
even the alumni who aren't in our group see it.
Yeah.
And I say, hey, if you're a Bruin, even if you're not a Bruin, maybe you're friends of UCLA, come join us at this happy hour. Like, I just don't be shy with it. And then that gets the attention.
Thank you.
Ron, I
Thank
see you wanting to make a quick point. We are at time, so why don't you make a quick 30-second point, and then I'll close this out, and then we'll let you all go. Thanks for hanging
in Orange County, our current president, Eden, she had a great idea. Every event that we do, whether it's athletics or not, we have some food involved. If we go on a hike afterwards, we go to some place and eat. And that's where the conversations and the storytelling takes place. So with her leading our group, we've built back up the numbers. And like for an upcoming, we call it a stroll, we have 60 people signed up. So that's food. Food for thought.
Thank you, Ron. Folks, I did have one final question for the panel, so I'm going to say it, and perhaps they'll share their thoughts in the chat as I close out. I wanted them to just share with us what is the one thing they want us to remember, an ask or a call to action. So as folks are hopefully stay on for our last minute here, hopefully our panelists can share their one ask or call to action. I will issue 2 calls to action or asks from all of you. One is, please nominate Bruins for the Story of campaign. We will send out the link probably a million times over the next year. So if you don't know where it is, we will send it out, but please nominate yourself or fellow Bruins for our Story of campaign. And secondly, per the conversation we were just having with Nancy's question, please practice storytelling, adopt these techniques of storytelling with your network, with your board, with the alums who attend your events. It can be used in recruitment and scholarship selection, in social media posts, as Marina mentioned, in mentorship, in fundraising, Spark campaigns, and otherwise, in speaking at events, whatever the case may be. Storytelling is a tool for you. Thank you so much, panelists, for sharing your insights today. Clearly, this could have continued. I'm sorry we didn't get to all the questions in the chat, but thank you for sharing your stories and your insights today. Thanks again to the Alumni Association for hosting this event. And thanks all for joining this afternoon, this evening. We hope to see you soon.
Thanks so much.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Thank you,
Bye.
Devon. Thank
Thanks,
you to
Devin.
Bye.
all of our panelists. We, of course, this would not be complete with our own ask. We are asking that as a network, if you could help us welcome the class of 2025. We want to celebrate and introduce our new graduates to our alumni network. So we're asking that you submit a vertical video saying, "Congratulations, class of 2025. Welcome to the next chapter of your Bruin story." The date that we would like the information is by this Friday. I know short notice, but if you're able to provide us that information, that would be great. And if not, we could still use that video in some other form of social media to welcome our new alumni. So there was an email from your staff advisor that has the link, and I believe we're also put the link in the chat. One last thing, we have an upcoming session of Leaders to Leaders on April 23rd. And it's about volunteer board recruitment and engagement strategies. So it kind of touched on what we just were talking about in terms of reaching out to alumni and connecting with them to get them involved. There will be an email coming with the link to RSVP, and the link to RSVP is also going to be posted in the chat. So again, thank you all very much. We went over a little, but I appreciate you all staying on. And again, thank you, Devon, for moderating such a great discussion with Marina, Connie, Ron, and Cheryl. Thank you again, and go Bruins.
Bruin.
Go Bruins.